You know your own degrees. Sit down. At first and last, the hearty welcome.
Thanks to your majesty.
Ourself will mingle with society and play the humble host. Our hostess keeps her state, but in best time we will require her welcome.
Pronounce it for me, sir. To all our friends, for my heart speaks, they are welcome.
See they encounter thee with their heart's thanks. Both sides are even, here I'll sit the midst. Be large in mirth, and we'll drink a measure the table round. There's blood upon thy face.
'Tis Banquo's then.
'Tis better thee without than he within. Is he dispatched?
My lord, his throat is cut. That I did for him.
Thou art the best, O the cutthroats. Yet he's good that did the like for Fleance. If thou didst it, thou art the nonpareil.
My royal sir, Fleance is scaped.
Then comes my fit again. I had else been perfect, whole as the marble, founded as the rock, as broad and general as the casing air. But now I am cabined, cribbed, confined, bound in to saucy doubts and fears. But Banquo's safe.
Aye, my good lord, safe in a ditch he bides, with 20 trenched gashes on his head, the least a death to nature.
Thanks for that. There the grown serpent lies. The worm that's fled hath nature that in time will venom breed. No teeth for the present. Get thee gone. Tomorrow we'll hear ourselves again.
My royal lord, you do not give the cheer. The feast is sold. That is not often vouched while 'tis a-making. 'Tis given with welcome. To feed were best at home. From thence the sauce to meat is ceremony. Meeting were bare without it.
Sweet remembrance, sir. Now good digestion wait on appetite, and health on both.
Mid please your highness, sit.
Here had we now our country's honour roofed. Were the graced person of our Banquo present, who may I rather challenge for unkindness than pity for mischance?
His absence, sir, lays blame upon his promise. Pleased your highness to grace us with your royal company.
The table's full.
Here is a place reserved, sir.
Where?
Here, my good lord. What is it that moves your highness?
Which of you have done this?
What, my good lord?
Thou canst not say I did it. Never shake thy gory locks at me.
Gentlemen, rise. His highness is not well.
Sit, worthy friends. My lord is often thus, and hath been from his youth. Pray you, keep seat. The fit is momentary. Upon a thought, he will again be well. If much you note him, you shall offend him and extend his passion. Feed, and regard him not. Are you a man?
Aye, and a bold one that dare look on that which might appall the devil.
Proper stuff. This is the very painting of your fear. This is the air-drawn dagger which you said led you to Duncan. Oh, these flaws and starts, impostors to true fear, would well become a woman's story at a winter's fire, authorized by her grandame. Shame itself. Why do you make such faces when all's done? You look but on a stool.
Prithee, see there. Behold, look. Lo, how say you? Why, what care I? If thou canst not speak too, if charnel houses and our graves must send those that we bury back, our monuments shall be the maws of kites.
What? Quite unmanned folly.
If I stand here, I saw him.
Fie, for shame!
Blood hath been shed ere now in the olden time. Ere human statute purged the gentle wheel, aye, and since too, murders have been performed, too terrible for the ear. The time has been that when the brains were out, the man would die, and there an end. But now they rise again, with 20 mortal murders on their crowns, and push us from our stools. This is more strange than such a murder is.
My worthy lord, your noble friends do lack you.
I do forget. Do not muse at me, my most worthy friends. I have a strange infirmity which is nothing to those that know me. Come, love and health to all. Then I'll sit down. Give me some wine, fill full. I drink to the general joy of the old table, and to our dear friend Banquo, whom we miss. Would he were here. To all and him we thirst, and all to all.
Our duties and the pledge.
Avaunt, and quit my sight. Let the earth hide thee, thy bones are marrowless, thy blood is cold. Thou hast no speculation in those eyes which thou dost glare with.
Think of this, good peers, but as a thing of custom, 'tis no other. Only it spoils the pleasure of the time.
What man dare? I dare. Approach thou like the rugged Russian bear, the armed rhinoceros, or the Hyrcan tiger. Take any shape but that, and my firm nerves shall never tremble. Or be alive again, and dare me to the desert with thy sword. If trembling I inhabit then, protest me the baby of a girl. Hence, horrible shadow, unreal mockery, hence! Why so? Being gone, I am a man again. Pray you sit still.
You have displaced the mirth, broke the good meeting with most admired disorder.
Can such things be and overcome us like a summer's cloud, without our special wonder? You make me strange even to the disposition that I owe. When now I think you can behold such sights, and keep the natural ruby of your cheeks, when mine is blanched with fear.
What sights, my lord?
I pray you speak not. He grows worse and worse. Question enrages him. At once, good night. Stand not upon the order of your going, but go at once.
Good night, and better health attend his majesty.
A kind good night to all.
It will have blood, they say. Blood will have blood. Stones have been known to move, and trees to speak. Augurers and understood relations have by maggot pies and choughs and rooks brought forth the secretest man of blood. What is the night?
Almost at odds with morning. Which is which?
How sayest thou that Macduff denies his person at our great bidding?
Did you send to him, sir?
I hear it by the way, but I will send. There's not a one of them, but in his house I keep a servant feed. I will tomorrow to the weird sisters. More shall they speak, for now I am bent to know by the worst means the worst, for mine own good. All causes shall give way, I am in blood, stepped in so far, that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go o'er. Strange things I have in head that will to hand, which must be acted ere they may be scanned.
You lack the season of all natures. Sleep.
Come, will to sleep. My strange and self-abuse is the initiate fear that wants hard use. We are but yet and young indeed.
I'm Joe Wolverton.
Go ahead, do it again.
Oh, yep, I'm still Joe Wolverton. And I do everyone except Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. I was up for Lady Macbeth, and I was robbed. I think it was one of those things that, I don't know,
So
person wanted someone with lighter colored hair. You know how it is. Blondes have more roles and all that. So anyway, but I do everyone except Macbeth and Lady Macbeth.
And he does a great job of it, as far as he can.
Sure. You know.
My name is Stephen Leavitt. I played Macbeth. Like Joey, I was up for another role. I wanted to be the ghost, but then they told me that this would be an audio recording, and the ghost doesn't have any lines. So
Nice.
I settled for Macbeth.
Is that why you showed up so pale?
That is why I showed up so pale.
No, that's
That
just what he
is.
looks like
That's just
naturally.
nature.
my nature, my
You-
cheek is already blanched
You were
with fear.
blanched with jeans.
Indeed.
Oh, dear goodness.
Yeah, so I settled for the title character of the Scottish
Well,
play.
you know.
The Scottish play. All right. Well, I'm Rebecca Hecht, and I called dibs, so I'm Lady Macbeth, and yeah, it wasn't. There was no rock paper scissors or anything. It was just me, and I'm not quite as witty as my two compatriots here. So
It's true.
I'm just the way that I am.
Half so witty, but quite
Yeah,
twice
that's
so
why I
pretty.
didn't get the part of the fool in this play. You know, the comedic relief in Macbeth.
The comedic relief. Just depending on your perspective, Lady Macbeth could be the comedic relief of the play.
You know, she's a very multifaceted character. You know?
I'm so happy the way you did it, though, because too often you hear people play Lady Macbeth and she's just black. You know, she's just the darkest, most evil, one-dimensional character. And nobody is that.
It's true.
You know, nobody is that. And so you did just a superb job of,
just like the idea
undulating, you know.
Of creating range, you know. I think, the idea that, you can only see stars when there's darkness, but you can also only see darkness if you know what light has been. I think that kind of idea and making sure that Lady Macbeth, she wasn't born evil. There's a character development that happens there.
Yeah, I think that's one thing, like we were talking before we started, that's one thing that people forget about her, is that this play begins with an act that's, of women that I've known, one of the saddest in their lives, is the loss of a child, a miscarriage, as it were. Because you think of the emotions in that, and I wonder if Mrs. Shakespeare, if they hadn't had some experience, having their two kids, which would be unusual for the time. But I personally know ladies that have experienced that and their entire lives have changed. They've gone from a happy-go-lucky girl to a perpetually sad woman. And it's disturbing to see, although not, you can't criticize her. And I think Lady Macbeth, too often people forget the orchestra of emotion that goes into pregnancy, the hope of it, and then the loss of it. You don't just lose a child, you lose a timeline of the next 80 years or so. And you've got to now recreate that with, not only with, people say, well, you start over. No, you start worse than over, because now you have some pain there that wasn't there before.
There was a might have been that's lost, which is so much worse than never
knowing
knew it. That there was something.
Exactly.
And what I really appreciate about Shakespeare is that we do get all of that nuance in Lady Macbeth. And I think he sets us up for misunderstanding almost, because so much of that character development is done off script and off stage, as it were.
But if you think about the fact that Shakespeare is not really taught properly, if taught at all, you wind up with a culture like ours where that's a bad guy and that's a good guy. That rarely is true. But we have this society where if you're not one of us, you're one of them, and everything you do is wrong.
That's really interesting, because in society, you're right, it is very, there are many factions and we're very divided. But even as that's been happening, I've noticed the characters in our stories have become much more morally gray and much more nuanced. And so it's interesting to see the dichotomy between people and the characters that they create.
I think it's one of those tragedies, unfortunate to use that word, one of the tragedies of our time, that they've practically erased Shakespeare from the curriculum, and they blame it on things that they say are inappropriate, double entendre and everything.
Which, you want to go places for some dirty jokes. Shakespeare certainly is not lacking.
It's laden with them. But I had Shakespeare all growing up as a child, and when it came to that stuff, we just glided over it. It's one of those things, what's wrong with saying you'll understand it sometime later? For now, focus on the things you do understand. focus on learning who this man is. Why do we care? You know, why is, you know, there's so many things that we get from Shakespeare, and one of them, yes, is the double entendre, but another one is the, I don't know, like I call it the pendulum. We're all on it. Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, all of Scotland in this case is on it, because what's going to happen to our history?
I wanted to go back to something, sorry, that you said earlier about, or was it Stephen, with Lady Macbeth's, a lot of her character development being taking place off screen, off script, I guess, and almost that we're set up to misunderstand her. And I think that's something that exists in a lot of Shakespeare's plays. He does, I'll take it to Hamlet, you know, where Hamlet has the play within the play where he's basically trying to get his uncle to admit to his guilt. And I think Shakespeare, he does that in his plays for the people of his time. You know, in the portrayal of women in his plays, even if you want to go to The Merchant of Venice with the Jew who's supposed to be the villain, but he isn't really the villain, and questioning those social norms and those stereotypes, and sometimes setting up his audience to misunderstand. But if you really study it and look at it, you come to realize that Shakespeare has a different message than what you would maybe take at face value.
That's a lesson that I learned. I talked to Mike about it one time, was my least favorite role. So I did Shakespeare in college and in high school. And my least favorite role was Iago, because I thought he was so despicable. But then as I started studying Iago and thinking through his motivations, Iago's no more or less despicable than Othello. Othello is in a certain channel. And so Shakespeare, sort of like you say, he leads you that way purposely to, you know, to zig when you think he's about to zag.
Yeah.
And that's what he does with Iago and Othello. Othello, when you think through, if you, like, I would just sit, I remember sitting in my room and thinking, why would he say this? Why would he do this? And you're like, I would say that. I would feel that way. Definitely. You know, I might not take it to the extreme that Iago does, but I love what you said, Susanna, about Shakespeare purposefully sets you up for that, to pull the rug out from under you.
Yeah.
And I think for an intellectual purpose.
Definitely.
Yeah. For the not for the purpose of entertainment, but for the purpose of, I don't know, what do they call it? Edutainment.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. It reminds me of when in the Bible Christ is talking to his apostles about his parables, and he says, "He that hath eyes to see, let him see."
Yeah.
And it just, I think, when we read Shakespeare today, we are blind to things that would have applied to people in his day, because I think his plays were just as moving and powerful and edutainment, if you will, in his day as they are in ours. But in our day, we perhaps see more that they didn't see, and they for sure saw things that we don't see. And so it's interesting how the stories can really tell different teachings over time, and they can travel through time.
That's what makes him a classic,
I was
right?
gonna say that's the mark of a classic.
Yeah, he's timeless. He's you know, his applicability to one's life is not screwed to one particular, you know, era. Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe there's something to the fact that it's almost a universal trope that kids hate Shakespeare.
Just so sad.
But it's predictable, because Shakespeare is portrayed as something where you're taught that. It's like I say, it's almost cultural.
Well, you sit down in an English class, and the teacher's like, "We're going to be studying whatever blah 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 play in Shakespeare. Sorry, this is the boring section of the class."
Precisely what I'm. Yeah,
like that's how you started off. It's like, why would you do that?
Why wouldn't you say, yeah? And you know what? One of the things I think is, for example, when I was teaching at a school and the kids were going to do a play, and I can't remember which one, the teacher literally handed out to them that I forgot what it's called, the like Shakespeare for Dummies, but the thing they do for to help kids understand Shakespeare.
The Cliff Notes version?
The Cliff Notes?
Yeah,
it has a name to it. I can't remember the name of it right now, but they're famous, and they have And so we're not going to read. And so she would tell them, you can print off scenes, but we're going to read together this, Shakespeare for Dummies. Well, right then you're telling them so many subtle messages. A, Shakespeare's too hard for you to understand. Rubbish. B, you're a dummy. Also not true. Right?
Yeah,
C, we don't have time to actually read this. Mate, you don't have time to skip Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Skip other things. Don't skip him.
For sure.
And even having seen a lot of that, Shakespeare, I think the formatting of a book doesn't do him as much justice because, well, number one, as I'm reading through this, as we were performing this, the line breaks are so strange, and you really have to read past that and contextualize everything. You have to contextualize his punctuation and line breaks.
And you did a great job of that, by the way.
Thank you. But you do have to contextualize all of that, and I think we've become too structured to our grammar to read him almost.
Hidebound, these are the rules and that's what you do, and Shakespeare's meant to be read this way. And I mean, Shakespeare, I think, would walk out of most Shakespeare performances.
You're like, this is heckin' boring.
This is so bad. Like, what's going on? What did they do to my baby? But if you take I have
Macbeth
the
experience.
Right, exactly. Like I have the Folger library collection, and I love that collection because when there are things like you're talking about that, or maybe it was you, Susanna, one of you said how that would make more sense to them, to the people of his time. When it has those marginal annotations that tell you this is what I was what he was talking about, that's the thing that I think is so invaluable. Don't make a kid, that thing that I say about Teflon words, don't let Shakespeare run off you. Read those marginal notes, and if you still don't get it, talk it out. Why is he saying this? Even in the act, the scene that we read, if you glide over some of that, like I looked up a bunch of that before we did this, so that I could contextualize what he's talking
Understand
about.
what's happening, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if you do that with kids, I mean, Shakespeare's no more inscrutable than the Three Little Pigs.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's fair.
The three diminutive swine.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's like that.
Hey, look at that. You didn't mess it up this time.
To practice the Scottish accent, I was watching Billy Connolly, and he talks about how something about a dwarf, and his wife is telling him, Billy, you can't say dwarf, and he's like, but he's a dwarf, and she's like, you have to say little person, and he's like, but he's not a little person. He's a dwarf. Why can't you say dwarf? And so, that sort of thing.
You have to say little.
You talk about. Yeah, I mean, do we explain the Three Little Pigs? Do we explain Ring Around the Rosie? No.
I mean, actually, it would be kind of good if someone explained that.
It would be lovely if teachers.
That's a rough little poem right there.
It totally is, but it's like I say, it's no easier to understand than Shakespeare. If you have, look at the prophets. Many times in Scripture, they'll have these visions, and are they left without a guide? Rarely. Always there's a guide. What does that look like to you? Well, it looks like this. Well, that's not what it is. It's this. So why shouldn't we have that for something like Shakespeare that I think if you read it the right way and with a guide can be a revelatory, transcendental experience.
Yeah.
Where you're a better man after reading it than you were before it. But you need a guide. If a prophet needs a guide, the rest of us do too. And I think there's nothing wrong with having a guide, but I would say when it comes to Shakespeare, beware of false prophets. There are many people who fancy themselves guides who aren't worthy of that role.
So let's talk about this scene. The scene you guys just did, let's contextualize that a little bit.
Yeah.
In Macbeth, what's going on here, and what are what should people know going into this?
I just think, one of the reason I suggested this scene is I think that there's so much craziness portrayed on a flat, stage, as it were, because you've got the murderers and you've
All
got
of them, pretty much.
Yeah, and you've got Macbeth walking, so excited. I mean, obviously, just reading it's harder to know, but he's so excited to see them coming in because now he's like, "Are they dead?" And dude has blood on his face.
Which that's just a bad move. Like, check a mirror or something, bro.
Well,
Don't walk into the
check
king's
your
court with
looking
blood
glass.
on
he's
your
so,
face.
yeah, exactly. But he's so excited when Macbeth's like, because Macbeth, here's all these people here to celebrate Macbeth, and Macbeth goes running over to this dude, and
Nobody else knows. because
nobody else knows what's going
They
on.
can't.
Right, you can't have anyone else know. And he runs over to him. He's like, "You've got blood on your face."
Yeah, that's the first thing he says too.
Right,
Like
he's like,
nothing else. Just like, oh my
Like,
goodness.
"You've got blood on your face. What went down?" He's like, "Haha, if I got blood on my face, it's Banquo." It's like,
Yeah.
and you're like, "Oh, thank goodness," and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
he
he's
didn't
like-
slaughter you.
and then he's like so taken. The fact that he's sitting, it just blows my mind. It'd be like if we were just having a big party here and there were just people all around. Steven walks in after I told him to go murder someone, and I'm like, pew! And everybody's like, "Where is he going?"
Yeah.
And I'm all
Steven,
going,
you've got blood on your
"Got blood on your
face.
face, dude."
He's like, you weren't that excited to greet the rest of us.
right.
And then, yeah, it's...
I think that's so bizarre. Wouldn't I? Okay, if I were Macbeth, I would have just played it cool. Like, I don't know, some hand signal.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
just
just
look
like-
at him and you do
like, got
like
the
your little
thumbs
head
up
gesture,
going.
you know?
Yeah, you got him. You killed him. Swell.
Tip your hat.
I mean, how you would have done the Flintons? Did you get both of them?
Check,
Yeah, one,
Get a little
two.
peace sign, throw it in there.
Right, exactly.
check your
Those-
fly. You got something on your face.
And exactly, and I don't know, and then just from that, because what really makes him lose his mind? Because he says, right, the one murderer says, "Yeah, we didn't quite get
We didn't.
Flint's," and then Macbeth just snaps.
And I think that's kind of the moment for me that I was going to mention is, he's so confident and comfortable. He's done the deed, he's done the murder, and he sent out this other guy. And then he finds out, oh, Leonce is not dead. And then he goes on and says, I'm scared, I'm cornered, I'm stuck, I'm afraid. And everything is kind of downhill from there, where I think, you realize that when you do something like, I like to personalize, not that I'm planning on murdering anybody, but
Keep this
Maybe.
going. Keep this going. Someday
method
the cops will
acting,
want this.
you gotta put on the character. But
How deep is that?
that when you walk down that road of errors and you try to hide, there will always be loose ends. You will never be able to neatly package up wrongdoing because the nature of it is to continue and to go on. It's never finished. And that comes back to bite Macbeth. And he realizes that
Well, even if no one catches him, you caught yourself.
Yeah.
Self-abuse that we talked about in many other ways, but in the way you mentioned, you're always going to, if you got away with all of it scot-free, you're always going to know you did it.
Scot-free.
the Scottish play.
No. That's true. And you really, even if you were condemned by nobody else, you still almost condemn yourself.
You're condemned by yourself and by God.
Man brings upon himself his own condemnation.
Yes. And I think, as to go for a religious aspect, men will be punished for their own sins and not for Adam's transgression, or that's not on our conscience. But anything that we do put on our conscience, as Macbeth has, we start to see the ghosts of that appear. And one thing I want to mention from a story perspective, first of all, kind of a mistake on his part to invite Banquo and not set up a seat for him, because the table's full when Banquo sits.
That's fair.
Macbeth either doesn't set a seat for Banquo because he's assuming that the murderers will do their job, which happens, Or he's assuming that he'll just stand for the entire meal.
Yeah, probably,
Which,
poor seating play. Maybe Lady Macbeth was actually the one in charge of seating arrangements here. You don't know.
that's true, but I just find that to be an interesting self-condemnation to any lords that were present and observant.
It's true.
That, we really miss Banquo, but there's not a seat for him.
We're not prepared.
Mm.
Interesting.
But did they?
Because he says the table's full.
No, yeah, I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
He said the table's full, and he said, "Well, here's a place."
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Where?" He says, "Well, here." And he's like, "Why don't you? What's moved your? What's your deal?"
Mm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The whole pointing out. To me, the whole thing is shut up about bloody Banquo.
Yeah.
Move along.
That's
Dude
true,
told
yeah.
you Banquo's dead. Skip along.
Just forget about him.
I mean, you're talking about in the scene. He says,
It's
"Well, we can't even kill someone nowadays. Back in the old days, if you killed a guy, he's dead." Says Macbeth. But nowadays, you kill him, he comes back, and
So inconvenient.
you're bringing him back. Shut up.
Exactly.
These
Eat your
millennials with their
food.
returned murders.
Exactly. Eat your food. You know what I mean? Eat your food. Hang out with your boys. Get a little,
You
drink.
already mentioned Banquo once. That was enough. That was
Say, hey,
that's
too
your
bad.
alibi. You set up your
Yeah,
alibi.
too bad Banquo's not here. That's everybody.
Oops.
Just move it along.
Just
Mhm.
well, I mean, there and you see that Macbeth is a terrible liar, and Lady Macbeth is probably the only reason that he's even made it anywhere in life.
But
Like, let's be real.
oh well, I mean, definitely so, and I think it's what we talked about earlier. She becomes, and you see it as we talked about. She becomes his mother.
Yeah,
In
in a lot of ways.
several, yeah, in many ways, because at several key parts in the play, it involves them in their bedchamber, which to the audience would have said, "Aha, this is where the magic happens," right?
Mm.
But what always happens in that key moment, Lady Macbeth somehow finds a reason to move away.
Mm.
Even at the end of this scene, when he's like, "Okay, if we can just have a bit of naughty time, maybe this will shake me loose." And what's her line is, she's like, you can tell she's just not into it like you would expect. Again, moving away from the bed. Again, him saying, well, we're young, and the double entendre, we are yet but young indeed, meaning we've just murdered, but also we're young, let's do some things.
Yeah.
Mm.
And you see she's just, you lack the season of all nature's sleep. Like, she really means sleep, and he means sleep together.
Mm.
And she's like, no. But again, taking it.
Just
But look what Macbeth says when the murderer says, yeah, because the murderer's being cheeky. Aye, my good lord, he's safe in a ditch.
Yeah, he's real proud of
I
this murder.
bashed him with, 20 gashes,
20.
the least of which would have been enough to kill him. Why did you
And
go on with the other 19 then?
Sadist.
And then
okay, go.
Macbeth's, what's his response? Thanks for that. Does he mean like, that's disgusting, or does he mean appreciate it?
Appreciate it's
Well, isn't that not the poor taken advantage of Macbeth? That's the Macbeth is saying, ooh, you bashed him 20 times? Yay, thank you.
Mm.
one thing that stood out to me now that you mentioned the 20 strikes, the 20 mortal murders, is all he sees and all he describes of the ghost is what the first murderer already described. Because if you bash somebody in the head 20 times, they're going to have gory locks. They're going to have 20 mortal
Precisely.
murders in their scalp, and he forces him from his place.
And here's the thing. What if that dude's lying because you want the king to like you?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
What if he doesn't want to get in trouble with the king and in walks Banquo completely alive and fine?
Just like a scratch, and
Yeah.
you're fine. Like,
He's completely created. You got Macbeth, who's supposedly the king, or, more or less, developing his entire understanding of what's real based on the couple of line testimony of this murderer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's bizarre
And
to me.
And if you were a murderer, like, if you were a murderer nowadays getting reviews, a 5-star review would consist of, "Yep, he killed him all the way. He killed him dead.
all
It
the
was-
way. He killed him all the way dead.
Nobody came
100%
Not
back.
to the
dead.
pain. He was killed
death.
to the death.
He was killed to the death. Exactly. And so the murderer is just giving himself a 5-star review. Yes, I killed him 20 times just to be sure. My customer service is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, he wants
Impeccable
to.
customer
He
service.
wants to please Macbeth, so he says more. Because murderers, did you do it? Yeah. And if someone says how, I don't know. I think you want to know how.
Deadest dead.
But this murderer's like, I bashed him 20 times, and the first one would have killed him. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's so. There seems to be so much that isn't human nature that maybe Shakespeare's saying, think about this dude's reality is all based on this unreliable person's testimony. And how often do you do that? Do you create, your world is created by something you hear. It's like when I hear people say, "Oh, I'm an atheist now because I've listened to this person on YouTube," and I'm like, you'd better put in a balance the people that, you know, your experiences with God, and in the other side put the reputation and character of the people convincing you he doesn't exist. You'd better weigh them, mate, before you go running off after the. And so I think that about Macbeth. Every time I am involved with this play, I'm like, he's just led about.
But he's hearing what he wants to hear.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Yeah, but he also after that moment, his reality is based on really flimsy testimony. Whereas Lady, you know, you get to everybody likes to paint her as the bad guy. But I'm like, yes, she does some bad things, but so does Macbeth. And at least when she does it, she shows the crazy side. You know what I'm saying? Whereas Macbeth is just like, oh yeah, thank you. I'm glad you did that. You know, whereas I imagine if he'd have made that report to Lady Macbeth, she'd been like, shut up. I don't want to hear all that.
Oh,
He's
is
dead.
he dead?
Yeah, is he dead? Yeah, good.
That's all.
Yeah, but I think important thing, just on a different subject, just make sure people hear, because I don't know why I feel, I'm one of those iconoclasts, I guess, but I just hate that everybody paints Lady Macbeth with such just in one hue. I mean, she's a lady that suffered, and I think Shakespeare gives us to know that, particularly if you see it played out. You can see sometimes actresses will take the direction of moving away from the bed, right? Giving the idea, in Lady Macbeth's head, her marital bed equals pregnancy, equals the greatest tragedy, the greatest pain she's ever known. And what is it? When a lady loses a baby, it isn't just they disappear. Depending on how far along, she's got to actually birth that child. Blood will have blood. You've got her, that moment of this dead child issuing out of her, who in her mind, every other woman in the world, this is the happiest moment of her life. And all I'm doing is giving birth to a growth. Blood will have blood. She's got to compensate, but no one ever thinks about that for her. And it makes me so sad. Not that she's a real person, but I'm just like, I want them to understand her. Yes, she does horrible things, but there's that old country song that says, don't blame her, life made her that way. I think about that with Lady Macbeth. Man, you try building up this hope. What are we going to name him? What's he going to do? What is he going to be, a doctor? Is he going to be whatever? And then suddenly the doctor tells you he's dead. That baby, now deceased, must come out of you. That's the worst. That twisted that poor lady. And now she says, what hope do I have? I don't want to go to bed because that'll be more tragedy. You know, And with her husband, well, I don't have to have relations and get pregnant. He's already here. I can make him into what I would have made our son.
I mean, this is a play in some ways. It's about futures. I mean, you have the witches who tell the future, and like I mentioned earlier, and I'll mention again, with, Macbeth has this future that he's told by these witches that will happen, and he tells Lady Macbeth, and for her it's, okay, well, we need to make it happen, because when her child died, that was a future she had no control of, but now she's been told that this great thing is going to happen for her husband, and she's not going to sit and wait for it to happen.
And I never thought about that until you just said it today. That's informed my understanding as well. She had no chance to accelerate the birth of her child, except unnaturally.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that's unnatural, it's the weird sisters of this play.
Which I think that's what the podcast should be called, The Weird Sisters.
All I can think about is the band in the Harry Potter series.
Oh, I don't even know that.
Which is a reference
No,
to
I'm
this
just
play.
teasing, by the way.
We're taking a vote now. We're changing the name of the podcast to The Weird Sisters.
Oh, what is it? What is the name of it?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. That's someone asked me today, what's the name of it? I don't know.
I don't know.
I threw out there the Shakespeare's shorts.
The troops.
Oh, that's
Shakespeare
cute.
shorts? You going with the whole double entendre thing? Someone's like, what's in Shakespeare's shorts? Dude,
Double
come on.
entendre.
Well, I mean,
three talented actors.
whoa, hey now.
There you go.
This week in Shakespeare.
I'm so sorry, Mom.
Mhm. This week in Shakespeare's shorts.
See, it works.
It's
You'll never forget it.
I won't ever forget. But,
Joey's like,
Try again.
I mean, it's got the whole double entendre going for it.
I'm in favor of it.
Of course you are.
What is that supposed to
I
mean?
just get
Of
an
course
image
you are.
of like Shakespeare in his house with his underwear on.
See, I have a different image.
Okay, good.
I
Replace that
have
one.
Shakespeare on the beach, walking,
Like sunglasses.
sunglasses,
Sure.
some neon
I
shorts.
was thinking like some board shorts, like
Yeah.
a white pair with like flamingos on it or
Okay,
something.
good.
Shakespeare.
Because I'm just thinking of him walking around in Anne Hathaway being like, what are you doing at home again? I'm a writer, Anne! Okay? It takes, I have my method.
Shakespeare would
Leave me alone. I
thrive
gotta-
in these Corona times,
That's a good
I mean,
working from home. I mean,
didn't he live through a plague? Is that,
Yeah,
am I
yeah,
getting
there
history?
was some-
See,
yeah.
exactly. Look at
we,
that.
we should really have a Ring
I'm a
Around the
history
Rosies
major.
version for the plague that's going on right now.
We'll make another one.
Someone could write
You're
that.
on the
yeah.
Rosie.
One of-
And then in 40 years,
Coronavirus.
no one would. What are they talking about?
1 in a million coughed.
Masks,
You know?
masks. We all get locked down. What?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I'm a poet.
Well, I think, are we gonna? Yeah, I mean that's, I don't know, the sisters that we don't read at the end. What are the words? Like a repetition of words. You'll use it in scriptures to get a point. What about the word time? The words time and tomorrow in Macbeth.
Mm.
Because you get the feeling sometimes that, like you said, Lady Macbeth is like, no, tomorrow might not, and she knows better than anybody.
Tomorrow might not come.
Tomorrow might not exist. This gets done today.
Good work ethic.
Sure. I mean, it's too bad, her work is a little twisted, but it is good work ethic.
Something else that I thought of that I've thought of before many times with the way women are portrayed in Shakespeare's plays, being a woman, I have some interest there.
Mhm.
And, in most of, if not all of the comedies, things work out only because the main heroes of the story listen to either their love interest or other female members of the cast. And things don't work out most often when the female characters are not listened to. And Macbeth is kind of a different play where you have a very twisted and evil female character, and it's Macbeth trusting in her and listening to her that ultimately leads him, to
to the tragedy, the end of this play. And it reminded me what you said earlier with when the murderer comes in and, he just trusts him on this testimony. I think it's, in some ways, it's a play about learning what kinds of people you can trust and what kinds of people you should trust. Because if you trust the wrong people, the play ends in tragedy versus other plays that end in comedy because they trusted the right people.
That's a good point. I mean, and that ultimately is one of the lessons. Because even in this scene that we did, ultimately what turns his mind into mush? The words of a murderer.
Of a murderer and some witches.
And so he listens to that guy and ignores you.
It's true.
I mean,
in some ways, he does. He does not put on the calm air that Lady Macbeth.
Shouldn't you have that sort of relationship with your woman that if she says, calm down, she's not trying to embarrass you or shut you up. She's trying to do what's good for you. Just calm down, not. And if he doesn't, then y'all shouldn't be together.
Exactly.
But if your wife says, hey, calm down, then calm down.
It's time to take a chill pill.
Don't even ask why at that point. Have such a relationship that she says calm down and you calm down.
And we see the opposite in this scene.
Exactly.
Where when Lady Macbeth says calm down, he's almost like, I'm completely calm. I'm fine.
Why would you ask?
If it wasn't for this ghost, I'd be fine.
Well, that's
you see him, right?
That's exactly what he says, though. I mean, he tells the ghost, if you were to appear in any other shape, I would have no fear. Be the lion, be the bear, be the whatever tiger, but he is the murdered man, and that puts him over there. That's what he's afraid of. And he also, he comments on Lady Macbeth. Of course, she can't see the ghost, but why, your rosy-colored cheeks. Why are you not afraid when I see these horrible things? And she's like, chill out, bro.
And he speaks some truth there, where I think if she did see the ghost, she would be a little more freaked out and afraid. And maybe she wouldn't put on the same guise because she sees what he's doing. She might be like, oh, well, we need to just ignore that. More so, but I think it would affect her too.
True.
And I think it's interesting that she doesn't see it.
Well, therein
she
lies
doesn't hear what it is.
Well, therein lies the question. Well, exactly. Does she not see it because she doesn't hear the description? Does she not? Would she not see it because it would? Even if she did, it wouldn't affect her that way. She's so beyond feeling in that way. When she talks about, there's this part in here where people always say that she's, well, all through Macbeth, people say Lady Macbeth is emasculating her husband. I don't know if I see it that way. In
many ways, she does question, are you a man?
But is she doing that to make fun of him or doing that to say, oi, remember who you are? There's a way to say, are you a man that's emasculating? And there's a way to say, are you a man that's encouraging? And I don't know. And when she talks about, you're telling these stories that would be a bunch of girls sitting around a fire that their grandma would tell. Now that sounds a little harsh.
A little.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Thinking of her wanting, he's the surrogate son. Maybe that attitude is less emasculating and more matriarchal. Trying to say, come on, be a boy. Stand, be a man, stand up, be a man. Less than, you're not a man, I don't know. I've always wondered that.
It's phrased as a question so that you can see, like, I think there's a lot of different ways you could portray that, because you could portray that as, are you a man? Like, are you, like, get up, you wimp?
Yeah, quit being a wimp, yeah.
But you can see it either way, and I think that's the proper way to use questions in stories, is to use them, because as an audience, we immediately have an answer of what she means by the question, but we can think of it in whatever way we want. And like so many other classics, it's up for interpretation.
Yeah, I had a Shakespeare teacher one time, not teacher, but you know, a director who would do this really interesting thing. He'd say, "We're only going to have in a scene with like the two of you. Only Lady Macbeth is going to read her lines. You're just going to react as Stephen."
Mm.
Oh, interesting.
And he would record it, right? So that you could hear. So she says, "Are you a man?" Don't read what's on the line. What would you say if your wife said, "Are you a man?" What would you say?
Well, you'd be
I'll
a little...
show you what a man I am.
Mhm.
Well, no, not physically. Well, physically of a
That's
different
not how I
sort.
meant that.
Oh, all right. I was like,
That's-
wow.
No.
Susanna straight to the... Well, no, physically of a different sort. See, that's my mindset. Like, because we went through the actors. I didn't play Macbeth or Lady Macbeth. Went through the act and the act. Pardon, I did play Lady Macbeth. I played all the actors, actually. I just, yeah.
You
I
were
just,
one man play.
yeah, it was a one woman play.
Are you a man?
Are you a man? No, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do half that as a sort of exercise in how do you hear it?
Yeah.
Are you a man? Yeah, I'll show you what a man I am in a minute.
Well-
And then she's like, well, because you're doing this. Okay, you didn't see the creepy ghost. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Say it in your own words to see, and then what you could do, and then what he would do is he would show it on the transcript on like the screen and say, do your reactions match up? And quite often you'll see they do. Now they're written in different words, obviously, but you'll see that your reactions actually match up,
Interesting.
and you're like, oof, that just made it so much more
Yeah.
real for me. You
Well,
know?
an additional thought I had to that question, you know, is she being emasculating? Is she being matriarchal? And it can be both in the sense that based off of Macbeth's reactions, I would take it to mean that he feels emasculated by that.
Mhm.
You know, he's
Yeah.
like, you know, but from her perspective, if this is her surrogate son, she may or may not intend that, but it's
That's
both
right.
at the same
It
time.
doesn't matter.
And in
At
some
the-
ways, it doesn't matter. Because
Yeah, but see, that
it's
was
how
like-
Macbeth takes it.
That's exactly right. Because the thing I was saying, I'll show you I'm a man.
Mm,
That's not the words of a confident man.
no.
That's the words of a man who feels he has to prove his manhood.
Because he just
I'll show
committed
you I'm
murder
a
and he's
man.
got to cover it up.
Well, in any sort of thing.
Yeah.
But if a woman says, "Are you a man?" you should be like, "Yeah." Not "I'll show you" or "Yeah," or that
Yeah.
defensiveness.
Yeah.
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 The
Let's go.
Yeah. So I think it's a, I don't know, it's a universal feeling that.
Are you a man? Why? Do you need one?
Oh.
Saucy.
Wow.
Saucy.
All right. Oh,
And she'd just run away. It's Lady Macbeth after her. No, run away. I mean, do you get but see the thing, and I know I'm harping on it, but it makes it so much more evocative when you think out damn spot.
Mm.
I mean, she was at home having that baby. And the spots everywhere. Spotting in her clothes before it's miscarried. Man, that's a lady that knows about that out. That's what her soul says.
Mm.
If I couldn't have had that night where my night clothes were spotted with blood, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be,
Out.
yeah.
She'd have her child, and she'd have the future that
And
she
she
wanted.
could be the mother that exactly that. Yeah, it's so deep, this guy, man, but no one ever thinks about it. I don't think, most people don't.
When she says, "Are you a man?" it almost puts him. It doesn't. That's where you start seeing him as her surrogate son, I think, because you don't ask that of somebody who you already respect as a man.
That's a good point.
So
Yeah, would you ever say that, I mean, Susanna, to your husband? You're not married now. but I mean-
Ideally not.
No, ideally.
Yeah,
you would-
ideally.
Unless he's being a child, then maybe.
Right.
But
But
if he
doesn't
is,
this...
then we're in a bad way because.
Right, but you learned that from Macbeth.
Mhm.
That's brilliant.
Mm.
Because someone put a comment on one of my videos and said, "Oh, the Bible teaches that better than Aristotle." Well, maybe and maybe not. It doesn't make the Bible less holy to say Aristotle taught something clearer.
Yeah.
And so to say, I learned how to avoid being, how to avoid emasculating my husband from Shakespeare. I don't think that's a shame.
No.
To say, oh, you should have learned it from the Bible. Okay, you can, but what's the harm in learning it from Shakespeare?
I mean, read you in the best books and
Precisely.
find truth, where it is. I mean, that's something that God commands. I mean, obviously, He's the source of all truth, but you find it where it exists.
Yeah, I mean, my Oxford version of the, what do you call it, complete Shakespeare is just marked to shreds because it's just annotated with scripture.
Mm.
Because I'm like, that teaches the same thing, but it sometimes the scripture pierces me more deeply, and sometimes Shakespeare does. And I don't think God has a problem as long as I learn the lesson,
Of
you know.
course. And
As long as-
attribute the fact that He still is the source of truth.
Precisely, and give Him thanks for letting you have a mind that can read and understand, eyes that work. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So many things that you wouldn't be able to know Shakespeare if it wasn't for God. And if you recognize that, like, I think that's perfect, Susanna. If you recognize that God made it possible for you to read Shakespeare, then I'm sure He's fine with you getting good learning out of Shakespeare.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it's necessary that we have works like Shakespeare that aren't scripture,
Mhm.
that teach truths, because all things testify of Christ and not just scripture. And so it's important that stand as a witness of that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Amen.
I had just the other day we had a family reunion, and my wife's sister she claims well, we're not gonna get into it, but question
Okay.
was, she might listen to this and then be like, why are you airing? But she had a question, and I'm like, above all, to thine own self be true. Who cares what others say about what happens after death?
Mm.
Who cares what the scriptures say? What do you think happens? To thine own self be true. That when he gives that instruction, yes, that's Hamlet, but when he gives that instruction, I think it's a good lesson, a lesson that I've, since I was little and first heard that, all the other things, to thine own self be true. To me, I've always said, that doesn't mean be selfish or be conceited. It means put all the truth into your head so that you don't have a problem being true to yourself instead of true to someone else's stuff. Because, wow, I'm just still thinking, you just changed my perspective on that, Susanna, about the whole
I'm glad.
running to her, fate. Because that key soliloquy of tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, people play that different ways. I've always seen it as Macbeth sort of mocking the way kids will do tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It's always tomorrow. You know how kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
When can we do this? We'll do it tomorrow. It's always tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
And he's
When
been
it
taught,
now.
right, he's been taught that.
Mm.
His wife is like, tomorrow might never come. So now he's in a position, like, quit telling me things are going to happen tomorrow.
Mm.
It's like, have you ever, had that experience when you pray and you feel like God says, oh, soon.
When is
And
it
then I
going to be
think-
now?
Right. And then you think of,
2,000 years.
right. Well, yes, a short season. That was 1,000 years. And when he said, when in Narnia, I think it's a horse and his boy, and he says, it's soon. And he says, what does that mean? And he says, all times are soon to Aslan.
Mm.
all time.
Which is
So when you-
infuriating.
It's infuriating.
I think, and even just taking that idea of a child and this whole kind of to Lady Macbeth, Macbeth is her surrogate son. Wow, English is hard. And I mean, we're children of God, and kind of it's the same idea of, we're waiting for when is tomorrow, when is soon, and
But do we ever, are we, when you're single, you want to be married. When you're married, you want a child. When you have one child, you want two. When you have, you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Satisfaction does not come easily.
Yeah, God must be sitting up there and saying, it's never enough for you.
Mm.
But we do that. We pray, oh, I don't want to be
But
single.
you know what? That's the point. Like, it's not supposed to be enough here on Earth.
Yeah, the whole C.S. Lewis. This is supposed to be a terrible hotel that you don't want to stay too long in.
Hotel Earth. It's the next Eagles song.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap up. Any other final thoughts that you guys have?
Well, I just hope we keep doing it. I'd like if we could do, if people enjoy it, we could do the hits and then maybe occasionally do a deep cut, like a Troilus and Cressida kind of deal.
The deep cut of Shakespeare.
Oh, yikes. See, that takes a whole... But there'll be people who love it. They'll be like, oh, they're doing the double entendre. And it's like, I'm not doing it. No, it's not true.
For me, there's just one.
There's only one entendre.
It's a single entendre, and it does not want to be married. It is
deep cut. The deep cut in his shorts is simply...
His flies down, it'll come up. Don't worry.
Right, exactly.
Don't worry about that.
But seriously, can you imagine like do some Titus Andronicus or something, deep cut stuff that's like really good, but not something you often hear about.
It's true.
Antony and Cleopatra.
Sure. Yeah, you hear about that. You don't hear it performed very often. Antony and Cleopatra.
Oh, there's another one that I can't remember what it's called. It's one I'd never heard of until the Southwest Shakespeare Company did it. I went and watched it with my mom.
Timon of Athens.
No, it's one word. It's a person. It's the main character's name, so that really helps.
Sibylline.
No.
Steve.
Yes, Steve by
The
William
Tragedy of
Shakespeare.
Steve.
It's a comedy, and I believe it's based on like a Greek something. You know.
He's got a lot. Well, he
So-
took Plutarch as his source material
Did he?
for the Romans and the Greeks.
Interesting.
Yeah, Plutarch. He just swapped it out, just changed it up a little
If
bit.
you'd taken Joey's class, you would know what Plutarch.
It's so funny when people are like, "That's just like in Shakespeare." Did he get that from Shakespeare?
It's like
Bruh.
switch it
Yeah,
around a little
Shakespeare
bit
had
there.
a time machine, and he went back 1,600 years before he was
Coming
alive.
soon.
I'm Googling it now for you. I will find it. All of Shakespeare's plays.
You want to just read them off? We'll decide what
There's
we're doing
not
right
that
on air.
many.
And
There you, well,
I
you
gotta
could do
find
a thing. Just have people vote for what we do
There
next.
you go. This is
The interactive stuff will
It's
help.
coming
Yeah.
with 3 options,
All right.
and then we'll put it up on Twitter.
all right.
On the Twitter, or we could do the
On the-
Instagram
on the
as well.
Instagram.
Yeah.
Instagram, yeah.
We'll Instagram it.
Did you find it?
My goodness.
You sure it's not Steve?
You know,
It
could be
I'm
Billy.
starting to think it might be.
Steve.
As if it's in alphabetical order, it'll be under S. So
I feel like it starts with a P. You just
Penelope.
Playa.
Playa.
I
Playa.
swear.
Playa.
Hey,
Shakespeare
Playa.
shorts. Playa.
probatio.
Probatio.
Pax
Pasteurization.
Romana.
Pasteurized.
Pericles.
Pericles.
Oh,
Okay.
Of course. That's a comedy. Pericles is a comedy.
I'm pretty sure it's a comedy, yeah.
Well, it's his name, and usually names indicate tragedy.
Well,
But
I'm 99% sure that it's a comedy.
you know what Pericles means in Greek?
What does it mean?
Parakleos means almost glorious.
Oh.
so it's a tragedy
I'm pretty sure.
because it was almost
and
glorious.
So it's very similar,
Almost
like,
famous.
Next to
idea of,
glory,
like-
almost glory. Yeah.
you know how like Odysseus spends forever like in the world, and then who finally
Uh-huh.
makes it home. It's a similar idea where he's
Oh,
kind
I
of
got
going
you.
on
We'll have to
adventures
read
and
it
getting
now.
into weird different situations.
I don't know that I've read. Maybe is it like for sure Shakespeare?
Yeah, it's for sure. Well, I mean,
But you know what
It's
I
on
mean.
the
It's not
list.
one of those. It's on the list.
it's on his
Okay.
list of plays. Yeah.
Pericles.
And
I'll have to look
it's
that up.
not a very well known. Like I'd never heard of it before
Right.
until I saw that the Southwest Shakespeare Company was going to do it, and I don't know. It's one of his older ones, I think, and
As opposed to like one done.
that he wrote last week.
you know,
yeah.
It's not any of his new stuff. I don't like his post boy band stuff. When him and Marlowe and Bacon were all together, their stuff was solid. But His post boy band is just weak sauce.
Let me see if I can find like a summary of.
So, all right. So, yeah, you got.
Pericles.
What do you think then, Mike? We should think of three
Three
plays.
Three plays.
plays.
We can figure out
We'll figure out the scenes later, but the three plays, like the hits. So Hamlet, Romeo and
Romeo.
Juliet.
Hamlet is just a solid one. Like,
Hamlet.
I love
Hamlet is so
to
good.
no end.
Okay, so Hamlet. We'll put that
Henry
up.
V,
Henry V, Julius Caesar.
Julius Caesar.
Gotta admit, I'm not strong on the tragedies, so.
You want a comedy one?
Well,
I mean,
I like.
as you like
I would
it.
love to do.
So let's. Why don't we
tragedies in
do
the sense I
that?
would be
Do
educated.
a history, a tragedy, and a comedy.
Oh, that
Okay,
sounds
so we
good.
Okay, so King Henry V.
So Henry V as the history,
Make Hamlet the tragedy since
Hamlet
we
the
just
tragedy.
did Macbeth.
and what comedy do you want?
What comedy
sweetie?
do I want? Oh dear goodness. I
Pick
don't
one
know.
I've already been in.
You-
Pick one you've already been.
Pick one you've done. I mean, one you like. It's all
Well,
up to you.
okay. Twelfth Night is one of my
Okay.
favorites.
12th night.
12th night.
12th Night.
Sorted.
Sounds
There you
good.
go.
That's
Okay.
a fun one.
So
Henry V.
Henry V,
Hamlet.
Hamlet,
12th
12th
Night.
Will be
night.
up on Instagram.
And then
All right.
we'll just once the people make their voice heard.
Are we allowed
We'll
Is
to
this
choose
a democracy?
scene.
Is this a republic? Are we electing
It's just
representatives, or
democracy.
just-
Democracy, but we get to choose the scene.
In the scene, we'll choose the
Okay.
scene.
Okay.
I think I have scenes I like in all of those.
I think
Hold on.
I love some parts of these plays by Shakespeare.
You know, I can't think of a great Hamlet scene at all.
I'm
But
sorry. Words.
we could do Hamlet the musical.
To
You know?
Hamlet,
The Lion King.
Hamlet the Second,
Oh,
Hamlet
Ophelia.
2, Electric Boogaloo, where Hamlet meets Louisa, a poor Puerto Rican girl from the wrong side of the tracks,
Louisa.
and she's like, "Oh, Hamlet, I know you've been with Ophelia. I ain't finna be with you, Hamlet. I know you with her." He's like, "Nah, girl, I ain't with her no more. You know, I'm all about you. Let's go dance in the rain." Oh,
You know,
Hamlet,
to-
I got
ain't-
you.
I got you.
To be or not to be, you know?
So Hamlet.
I got
Henry
an
V,
answer.
And
And 12th night.
12th night.
All right.
All right. So so what are we really calling it? Shakespeare shorts? People want to know.
Yes.
It's okay.
We're doing
Fine.
it.
Okay.
Fine.
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare.
Executive order.
For-
Shakespeare.
Susanna. Shakespeare short.
This is gonna get confusing because I introduced myself as Rebecca.
Oh.
This is-
Oh
It's
yeah. What
okay.
should we call you?
It's all good. No
We'll call
one
you-
knows. I don't know when you're
Larry.
Every time we'll switch.
You'll
your name.
switch.
Lady Macbeth. Okay.
I'm good with either. I don't know.
Are you sure you are?
Well, so I don't like my first name,
Which
But-
is your first name?
Susanna,
Why don't you like it? It's beautiful.
because okay, this is
Oh,
gonna
I
sound
think
terrible.
you explained it
Have
before
I
because
explained it? Well,
like Americans call
Well,
you Suzanne or
well, so
something.
it's spelled with an E because it's
Right.
German, but also like Susanna. I feel like Susanna is a Southern belle who like chills with Scarlett O'Hara, and they like
I
have
mean-
two brain cells between them.
I don't know. There's
And
worse
like
places to be. I
that's
mean,
not like me,
Oh,
you know.
Susanna.
So do you like Rebecca better?
I do like Rebecca better.
Then just say that, and I can
well,
train myself to call you Rebecca.
I just
mean, you
feel
s-
bad for people who've called me Susanna for so
So
many
now that-
years now.
Why?
That
This is going to
I
go
don't
out
know.
to the world forever.
yeah,
It's Rebecca.
Susanna Rebecca. It's not Rebecca.
it's
Yeah.
The Hecht.
We'll see you next week.
I mean, this is one of the few people I know in the world that mispronounces her own name.
it's Susanna. You know.
No, that part's fine. Your last,
Hecht.
yeah, she mispronounces her own name.
Because I'm sick of going, my name is Hecht, and people are like, what? Hecht, what? Hecht. Hecht, that's fine.
Sure, whatever. Yeah.
Ish.
I always, when I talk about Rebecca, which is often when I talk about, things in school that were good, I often say she's one of the few people I know in the world that doesn't know how to pronounce her own name.
Even my dad does it. He'll be like, well, with his first name too, because his first name is Roland, and everyone will say Ronald, and he'll be like, sure. that's
Ronald,
fine."
yeah, whatever.
He goes into restaurants and he'll be like Ronald Hecht in his German accent.
Ronald Hecht. That's rough.
time.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Here we go.
We'll see you next week.
Shakespeare shorts.